Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. So on day 2 of his India visit, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi. The two leaders held delegation-level talks where they welcomed the intensification of bilateral engagements since the virtual summit and the positive momentum in cooperation across the full spectrum of bilateral relations. As per the MEA statement, both Prime Ministers expressed satisfaction at the progress in implementation of the ambitious Roadmap 2030 for India-UK future relations that was launched at the virtual summit last year, and also appreciated its regular review by both sides. Also, both leaders expressed their desire to steer bilateral relations towards a Vision 2047 for shared security and prosperity of their people as well as the planet. The talks, besides, also covered various aspects of trade and investment, defense and security, climate and energy, also strengthening people-to-people ties, and regional, global and multilateral cooperation. So what have been some of the significant decisions, agreements, observations, also concerns, is what we will try and analyze over the next 30 minutes with three very distinguished panelists joining me virtually on the program. With great pleasure, I welcome on this edition of Perspective Mr. Dhanendra Kumar, former Executive Director for India at the World Bank. He's been the first Chairman of Competition Commission of India. Mr. Gurjeet Singh, former Ambassador, and Professor Harshvi Pant. He's Head of the Strategic Studies Program, Observer Research Foundation. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on Sansad TV and welcome to the program. Before we begin talking about the significant takeaways from the very important talks that took place between Prime Ministers of both countries, Ambassador, let me begin with your response on a very interesting remark made by Boris Johnson this afternoon after meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He said that, and something which has been making headlines through the day today is about the Indian vaccine. He said it's the Indian jab which is up in his arms, and he, in fact, appreciated India's vaccination program, vaccine diplomacy. So on the diplomatic front, diplomatically for India, coming in from the Prime Minister of a country which until a few months ago was reluctant to recognize the Indian vaccine, how symbolic, how significant is this statement from Boris Johnson?
Thank you, Tina. I think that remark perhaps symbolizes the entire visit. So with that recognition that India is an equal partner in vaccine diplomacy, Prime Minister Johnson has signaled that India is an equal partner in a large amount of items that we are going to be doing together. And that is why the Vision 2030 will go to Vision 2047. I think particularly it's important to note that Britain has been among the loudest critics of Russia on the Ukraine crisis. And in the midst of the Ukraine crisis, Prime Minister Johnson found time to come to India on a long delayed visit. I think that is extremely symbolic because that shows that Ukraine or no Ukraine, India is extremely important. And as whatever crisis in the world, COVID, energy, Ukraine carries on, Britain needs India to build a new partnership. Without India, Brexit has very little meaning. And in order for Mr. Johnson to look good, he needs a solid partnership with India. And I think that is what he came here to consolidate. On our part, I think we were rather good to him protocol-wise. Normally, all visits begin in Delhi, and the next day, the leaders go to other cities. Here, I think we were quite good to him, and the visit began in Gujarat, and he came on the last leg of the visit to Delhi.
Absolutely.
I think all in all, very good signals.
On the first day of his visit, in fact, when he was in Gujarat, I think it was quite high on optics, Mr. Kumar. There were visuals, of course, coming in of him being accorded a very colorful welcome in Gujarat. He also visited the Sabarmati Ashram. There were interesting visuals of him trying his hand at the charkha as well. But coming to substance, and as the ambassador said, post-Brexit, UK sees a lot of interest in India. So, and that explains, that before coming to India on his first visit as Prime Minister, Boris Johnson did spell out two key priorities, enhancing defense and economic cooperation. So after the conclusion of his two-day visit to India, In terms of economic ties, what is the kind of tangible outcome that you see, Mr. Kumar?
Thank you, Tina. I would also like to underline this with first the form of the visit, because it began in Gujarat and in Sabarmati, which is extremely significant in my view. Also coming in soon after COVID pandemic, after the Brexit and after this Ukraine war, when Boris Johnson has also visited Ukraine himself, I think it does point out a few things in itself. But coming to the substance which you mentioned, I think it is extremely important for both of us when both the Prime Ministers had last year raised the engagement to strategic partnership level. And therefore, what we have been talking, what we have been expecting, not only about the early harvest agreements, which are in the making, and hopefully we can expect something soon, but also more comprehensive free trade agreement between the two sides. And in this thing, we hope that we'll be in the early harvest agreements can cover some of the low-hanging fruits, and in due course can cover some of the more important areas. The two sides, because of the old historic ties, the cultural, the emotional, and the strategic ties between the two sides, I think both can gain a lot, and both in terms of goods and services. And there could be a number of elements included in this, which could be visas, which could be lowering of fee for the students. And in terms of the various investments which are being contemplated, Indian investments, Indian companies investing in UK, wherein we are talking in terms of 11,000 or so jobs and more than £1 billion pounds worth of investments. This is going to open new vistas of economic cooperation. Britain already has several projects in India traditionally, and more are in the offing. The sectors which you mentioned, defense, also other sectors like pharmaceuticals and textiles and so on, there would be several areas which would be benefiting both sides, the IT sector and also India being now number 5 in the world economy, and Britain is number 6. I think between the two sides, a number of new areas could be covered, which would recognize the new emerging possibilities, considering the startups in India, considering the new unicorns which are emerging in India. And I'm sure in due course of time, many of these would see collaborations with UK also. So I feel that in substance also, this economic partnership, the strategic economic partnership between the two sides would be beneficial to both sides.
Absolutely. So a significant outcome, as you point out, both in terms of optics as well as substance. Professor, what is your opinion? Because it's been significant in a number of ways. It's been the first visit of Boris Johnson to India as Prime Minister. It had been long pending. He had to cancel it on 2 previous occasions. And more importantly, this visit comes in a year when both countries commemorate 75 years of bilateral ties, while India celebrates its 75th year of independence. So in terms of a win-win situation for both countries, what do you think have been some of the crucial highlights?
Tina, I think this is a unique moment in India-UK relations. I have never seen so much convergence across so many diverse issue areas between the two nations as we are witnessing today. This is a moment to seize, and I think the two nations are seizing the moment. If you look at Mr. Johnson's visit, as you mentioned, was it's been a long-standing one. It was supposed to happen last year. It could not happen twice. So third time lucky, I guess, in terms of just both the optics and the substance. But I think most importantly, this visit is part of this endeavor to consolidate a relationship that had often lacked ambition. India and the UK had a lot going for them. Cultural ties, people-to-people contacts, even the semblance of economic relationship. But there were always geopolitical differences, which led to an inherent divergence and never allowed the relationship to mature beyond a point. Today, what we are witnessing is that there are challenges, of course, as Ukraine demonstrates. But beyond that, the perennial questions on Pakistan, on terrorism, on China, for example, are getting bridged. The differences are getting bridged in a manner that we have not seen in the past. The differences remain, but I think in Johnson administration in particular, it is one of the most pro-India administrations we have seen in a long time. Also, on the Indian side, there is a lot of commitment to this relationship that we are seeing, a lot of emphasis on deliverables, on deliverable outcomes, and I think that is targeted outcomes, and that bodes well for the relationship, because a number of these discussions we have been having for a very long time. The FTA discussion, for example, the discussions about how do you strengthen India-UK defense engagement. But what we have seen in the last few years is a real commitment on both sides to find solutions to contemporary challenges and to find ways of strengthening this relationship. And therefore, when you talk of the Indo-Pacific, when you talk of defense partnership, when you talk of economic partnership, when you talk of people-to-people ties, there has always been this issue of labor mobility, student mobility, and all those issues are being looked at as a package. And so when you look at them in a consolidated manner, you also see solutions emerging in various respects. So as Britain looks to its vision of a post-Brexit foreign policy, and as it looks to engaging with partners in the Indo-Pacific, and as India looks to enhance its partnership with like-minded countries in the Indo-Pacific, this is a unique opportunity for them to consolidate. And I think a lot of what is happening, the movement on the economic front towards FTA, the movement on defense partnership, which I think, again, some of the signals are interesting, that look, Britain wants to now enter into an area where they are focused on more co-production and co-development, enhancing India's defense manufacturing base rather than a mere buyer-supplier relationship. I think all that is changing. And that is good for the relationship, that is good for the larger momentum that has been created. And Mr. Johnson's visit perhaps highlighted, as Ambassador Singh mentioned earlier, that despite Ukraine, the two sides remain committed to seeing this relationship achieve its full potential. And that's, I think, a wonderful sign.
Absolutely. Ambassador, so, the fact that despite geopolitical differences, despite being on two very extreme views on the current Ukraine crisis, what this visit reflects is that we have matured as partners. And, if for the benefit of our viewers, you could explain to us how earlier there was mistrust, there were domestic issues on which there were divergences. But now, because we've evolved from that, so in a year when we are marking 75 years of our independence, how have we evolved as mature partners, as mature democracies, where now we treat both sides treat each other as equals?
So, in the 21st century, puberty for states comes early. You don't have much time to grow up. Either you grow up or the world forgets you. And India has shown how mature it is. So I think you see Mr. Johnson here, but you see the next few weeks, and it will be India and Europe all over. So India, the European construct, which we have assiduously done over the last 5 years, is now paying handsome returns. And we are taken seriously by all our European partners because of our economic growth, our steadfast democratic credentials, and our standing up for what are international values. Secondly, I think it is most significant that Prime Minister Johnson made it in 2022. I mean, on our 75th anniversary of our independence, who else would we want here if not a British Prime Minister knocking on our door and saying, can we be friends? I think that is the maturity and the growth of our relationship. And I think most important, I would like to say, look at the diversity, as Professor Pant has pointed out. Now, if you look at defense itself, I think three significant things. One, a defense minister meeting has been established. This is not a 2+2, it's a 1+1. Secondly, We have been talking of the Indo-Pacific, but now Britain will co-lead the IPOI maritime security pillar, real-time cooperation. Already their carrier battle group has been in our region. And as Professor Pant said, they are now ready to co-produce in India and transfer technology. They haven't yet said investment, but they are coming. Now, when people talk that India should diversify its defense purchases, this is what we want. We are ready to get new technology, but we want it invested in India for co-production, which many countries in the West who don't mind selling still don't want to do. So this, what Britain is doing, is a good thing. Linked to this, you have the economic side. Now, yes, Mr. Dharendra Kumar has mentioned the FTA. The FTA will double our trade in the next, say, 5 to 10 years. But you know, when India negotiated the BTIA with the EU, with Britain inside it, Britain was the most difficult country to deal with. Today, they have grown. After Brexit, they realized what they said then, they cannot say now. And they need to learn from Australia, which is viewing India economically, but strategically. And that is where the maturity in Britain has come. They are not viewing India as where all the Indians came from. They are viewing India where a modern partnership can be resurrected.
Mr. Kumar, have they actually, matured? Because as Ambassador Singh is pointing out, it was difficult to negotiate with the UK. But what we are witnessing is within a year, we have been able to get FTAs with UAE, with Australia. But with the UK, although there is positive momentum, we are hearing, from the British Prime Minister that the deal should be done by Diwali. But analysts suggest that it is hoping against hope. What are the major hindrances that remain, and how hopeful are you of a deal actually coming over by the end of the year?
As Ambassador Gurjeet mentioned, today both sides know, and there is a recognition, particularly on the British side, that they are talking to equals in every sense of the term, and therefore one has to be on the same pedestal in the respective needs. Now, there have been a few sticky points in the past about the lowering of the custom tariff barriers and about the visa problem, about the exchange, about the mobility of our professionals, and so on and so forth. So it is hoped that with the recognition of India's growing economic profile in the world right now, and the mutual complementarities, probably there would be much greater flexibility to clinch the deal by Diwali. It has been made out. Probably it will also be cognizant of the fact that a number of benefits would flow to Britain also, as also to India, creating employment opportunities on both sides and exchange of technologies. Pharmaceuticals has already been mentioned. AstraZeneca, the recognition, how it has been done on both sides, and it is after the initial hiccups in public posturing there. Now there is a recognition. And on the IT side, on the number of projects that are, I don't wish to, for paucity of time, go into details. There are so many projects which are in the offing. We hope, and this is just a beginning, once there is a greater mobility and far more acceptance in terms of the regulations, in terms of the customs and tariff barriers and so on, the numbers will go up substantially.
Okay.
There is also a talk of a bigger project of OneWeb, where Airtel is a partner with BT, and they would be the LET low orbit spacing satellites. And this is and of course the trucking and so on and so forth. We hope that in times to come, with the growing recognition and hopefully flexibility on this account, it would be possible to clinch the deal by Diwali. And if there are any points which are still left out, sticking, probably we can leave that out for the next phase. It's a work in progress, but right now we have made substantial headway,
Certainly, and the negotiations are headed in the positive direction. We are hearing positive reactions from both sides, so let's be hopeful. Professor Pant, another focal point, and which you also mentioned earlier on, was the shared concern over a free, open Indo-Pacific. Now, what are the UK's interests in the Indo-Pacific? In recent years, we've seen an increasing tilt towards this region. So help us and our viewers understand, how does the UK stand to benefit from its change in stance in foreign policy as far as the Indo-Pacific region is concerned?
Well, Britain has been in search of a foreign policy ever since Brexit, because ultimately the underpinning of British approach to the world rested on its engagement with the European Union. And once that relationship was severed, I think Britain has been looking around the world to see what kind of a role it can play in the changing world order. And therefore, when you go back to its integrated defense review that it conducted 2 years back, and it was in some ways a statement of intent that Britain is, like much of the rest of the world, views Indo-Pacific as the center of gravity of global politics, global economics, global strategy. So Britain, as one of the leading maritime powers, would want to be part of this vast maritime space. And of course, Britain itself has interests in these regions, whether it is about trade, whether it is their diaspora, whether it is territory. So Britain remains a resident power in more ways than one in the wider Indo-Pacific. And I think Britain has been engaged in carving out a relationship with this maritime space for a very long time. It's just that I think given its other problems, and in particular the Brexit, which it took such a long time to resolve, took its toll on how to emerge and engage with other partners. Now that Brexit is out and Britain has to carve out a new relationship with the rest of the world, India is perhaps the most important country in the Indo-Pacific with which Britain has to come to terms in terms of the 21st century relationship. And that's what we are witnessing now. Therefore, this new momentum in the relationship that Britain wants, because ultimately, if Indo-Pacific, if the sea lanes of Indo-Pacific are secure, if there is stability in the Indo-Pacific, then I think that drives, particularly for a country like Britain that is outward oriented, trade oriented, based on global trade and global finance. This is the region that will drive Britain's prosperity as well. And therefore, you see Britain making this argument again and again that a large part of Britain's economic engagement is going to come from the Indo-Pacific. And therefore, the spurt that we have witnessed in the last few years in terms of Britain taking that effort, making that effort, leading the way in some ways, is a recognition of that reality. And of course, the India-UK partnership, in more ways than one, because of the comfort level amongst people-to-people ties and cultural links, has been the centerpiece of that engagement. And what we are witnessing today in terms of Mr. Johnson's visit, and what we have witnessed over the last 2 years, is a consolidation of that effort, that around Indo-Pacific, if you can carve out a strategic outreach with India, with other like-minded countries, then the possibilities remains immense. Of course, one has to mention AUKUS also as part of this arrangement, which Britain and the US and Australia have been part of in terms of redefining Britain's security role in the region. So there is a larger paradigm shift happening where from the Atlantic to the Pacific, Britain is also shifting its gaze. Now, there are a lot of questions that one can ask about the resource endowment that Britain has, whether it has the capacity to be a critical player. But I think there is no doubt that as far as India is concerned, as a like-minded country, India welcomes Britain and British role in the Indo-Pacific. And that's, I think, key to our relationship, broader relationship, and key to our partnership in the Indo-Pacific. And as Ambassador Singh was pointing out, Britain taking a role in the Indian Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. I think that's a very important indicator that Britain is willing to play the kind of a role that it was shying away from for a very long time. And India has welcomed that, therefore. Okay. And I think it also allows you certain convergence on the broader issue of China. For a very long time, Britain was reluctant to acknowledge the challenges that China is posing, primarily looking at China as an economic partner, as a land of economic opportunity, as a country that provides economic dividends. But I think today you see the dramatic turnaround among the European countries. Britain has been one of the most vociferous critics of China in recent years. So I think there has been a dramatic shift in Britain's mood, and therefore its approach to Indo-Pacific has gained momentum, and therefore India-UK partnership has also gained momentum in more ways than one.
Okay, Ambassador, very quickly, another area of prominence that has been spoken about is the Global Innovation Partnership. Of course, it's very significant, but take us through how it's going to benefit the backbone of our economy, the MSME sector, the startups of which India is emerging as a hub. How is it going to benefit all of that?
Yes, I think Mr. Narendra Kumar explained this, how the startups and unicorns will all benefit from this new innovation partnership, which will bring the students and the young entrepreneurs of both countries together. Significantly, in the joint statement, there is a commitment that up to $100 million would be spent over the next 14 years for India and the UK to scale up these projects in third countries, particularly in Africa. And I think that trilateral partnership is something very significant. We are also talking about the CDC coming in with about $1 billion over the next 5 years. The UK will provide $1 billion guarantee to the World Bank for green projects in India. So I think this is a fulsome relationship. But I think there are some points of caution. One, Britain often announces how much investment it is expecting from India and job creation. The reverse, how much FDI will come to India, is rarely quantified. I think that needs correction.
Absolutely.
Secondly, when you are having almost annual summits, last summit was hardly a year ago, then you need to make sure that implementation is very closely monitored and you need lead to results. You can't keep issuing the same joint statement. Therefore, Indo-Pacific leading to IPOI, defense leading to ships and aircraft, these are important ideas.
Certainly.
But
Mr. Kumar, one final comment from you.
Area,
I apologize, Ambassador, massive crunch of time. So I'll quickly take one concluding remark from Mr. Kumar. So even though, we are engaging in diverse areas, several analysts have said that when it comes to economic potential, it's not being harnessed to the maximum. So when it comes to divergences, when it comes to the same old joint statements, how do we progress further from here on?
Thank you. Very relevant. I'll just like to make one quick observation. I know you're running out of time. If we talk in terms of Commonwealth, India is a prominent member still, and there are a lot of countries in Commonwealth who might still be looking at Britain, and India can be a prominent player in this regard by its access to technology, by the appropriate technologies relevant for those countries. If those are supported, as Ambassador Gurjeet mentioned, by CDC, the Commonwealth Secretariat, and World Bank, and by the way, I've been in the World Bank also, and also based in London when I was actively collaborating with CDC. I feel that's an area where there could be much greater collaboration than what exists today, which could benefit a lot of developing countries, smaller countries, which have been part of the Commonwealth Secretariat, and also some of these startups and the third country projects could materialize together as a result of this cooperation.
Okay, so even though, a wide range of areas on which discussions have taken place, on which India and the UK have been engaging, particularly in recent years post-Brexit, because both countries stand to benefit from each other. There have been a host of agreements as well, and now there have been talks about how to take it further. There's a Vision 2047 being spoken about, but there is still huge potential in areas that Ambassador and Mr. Kumar have pointed out. Massively running out of time. I'll have to wrap up the discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on the program today for this very, very engaging discussion on the entire gamut of India-UK relations, how they've evolved over the years, and of course, the future potential. It was extremely my immense pleasure to host you on the program today and hear your perspective on this very, very important subject. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So that's it from us on this edition of Perspective Today. Thank you to all my viewers as well for your time. See you again next time. Thank you once again.